Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to the big news. The topic for today's discussion, UN Convention to Combat Desertification. Before we understand what this topic is all about, we have an announcement. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS is resuming the weekly current affairs explained session. Today's topic would be India's crackdown on VPN. So please do tune in on our YouTube channel from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. and this session will be handled by Chetan sir. Let's get started and try and understand what is this topic all about. What is the context? We have the World Day to Combat Desertification and Drought. This is celebrated every year on 17th of June. So the day was chosen back in the year 1995 by the United Nations for spreading awareness about environmental degradation. If we look into the statistics since 2000, the number of drought-like events has increased by 29%, while the duration of such events has also increased according to the United Nations. Already, 2.3 billion individuals face a situation of water stress where potable water resources are not present for use. All the countries in the world are at the risk of water shortage, and water shortage is expected to hit 25% by 2040. This basically means that the world is going to face severe issues of desertification as well as drought. In order to overcome this crisis, what we celebrate every year is the World Day to Combat Desertification and Drought. What is the significance of this day? The day focuses on turning degraded land into healthy or fertile soil to combat the desertification. It is also aimed at bringing together all the resources, whether it is the government, the private, the NGO, the civil society together to prevent environmental degradation that is caused by human induced as well as the natural factors. If we have to speak about the theme for the year 2022, the theme for the year 2022 is rising up from drought together. So this basically emphasizes the importance of early preventive action to combat desertification and soil degradation in order to protect sensitive dry land ecosystems. In this particular backdrop, we have to understand what is this United Nations Convention to combat the desertification. What is this United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification? This was opened for signature in 1994, entered into force in 1996, and the sector that it looks at is combating desertification and droughts. Has India ratified the UNCCD? Yes, back in the year 1996. Remember, this can be important from the preliminary examination point of view. And the nodal agency to fight desertification happens to be the Environment Ministry. So the first important question is, what is desertification? Desertification is not the natural expansion of existing deserts, but the degradation of land in arid, semi-arid and dry subhumid areas. It is a gradual process of soil productivity loss and the thinning of the vegetative cover because of the human activities and climatic variations such as prolonged droughts as well as floods. So when we speak about the definition, destruction of the biological potential of the land, which can ultimately lead to desert-like conditions, is what is called as the desertification. So desertification is also a type of land degradation. So the question is, what is the difference between land degradation and desertification? So when we speak about land degradation, it basically involves the soil as well as the vegetation degradation. So what is soil degradation? Soil degradation basically refers to negative changes in the physical, chemical, biological properties of the soil. Similarly, we have what is called as the vegetation degradation. So what is this vegetation degradation? When we speak about it, it is the reduction of number of species and the vegetation composition. So desertification is a type of land degradation. So land degradation is a bigger term and desertification is part of this land degradation. So what are the causes of desertification? Among human causal factors are overcultivation, overgrazing, deforestation, poor irrigation practices and overexploitation is generally caused by economic and social pressure, ignorance, war and drought. When we speak about this convention, this happens to be a legally binding convention linking development and environment to sustainable land management. So remember, this happens to be a legally binding convention. So if we have to balance the environment, we have to take into picture two important aspects. One is the development, the other is the sustainable development. So it is important that we all develop, but this should not be at the cost of the future generation. So managing environment basically means we have to develop on one side, and this has to be sustainable in the near future as well. The UNCCD addresses particularly the arid, semi-arid, dry subhumid areas called the drylands, where some of the most vulnerable ecosystems and people are found. The convention was drafted and open for signing in 1994. It became effective in 1996 after receiving 50 ratifications. The convention obliges national governments to take measures to tackle the issue of desertification. The convention's 2018 to 2030 strategic framework is a comprehensive international commitment to attain land degradation neutrality, aiming at restoration of productivity of degraded land. So if there is a degraded land, we have to improvise on it, increase the soil fertility, whereby the productivity of this land is restored to its optimum level, enhancing the livelihood of people dependent on them and mitigating the impact of droughts on the vulnerable populations. The convention focuses on having a bottom-up approach to achieve its goal. We have two types of approaches. One is the top-down approach. The other is the bottom-up approach. When we speak about the top-down approach, what happens? You would have the central authority which would be giving all the initiatives that have to be taken up. But when it comes to the bottom-up approach, it means you also have people who are also participating in it, and ultimately their viewpoints would be considered. The same might also be implemented. So when it comes to this convention, people are also participating, and as a result, what this convention is a bottom-up approach. The UNCCD is one of the three conventions, the other two being the Convention on Biological Diversity and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Why did this convention come into picture? Desertification is a worldwide problem. This directly affects 250 million people and a third of the Earth's land surface, or over 4 billion hectares. In addition, the livelihoods of some of 1 billion people who depend on land for most of their needs, and usually the world's poorest in over 100 countries, are also threatened. So because we had to bring an end to the desertification, which is why we brought into picture this particular convention. At the time the UNCCD was born in Rio, degradation of land was mostly viewed as a localized problem, one that was mainly affecting the countries in Africa, and over a period of time these countries realized that there has to be a convention where the global community comes into picture. They also help the African countries. So it was the African countries who brought into picture that we require the convention, and over a period of time it was not only hitting Africa but multiple other countries as well, and it became increasingly clear that land degradation was impacting the global network of food, commodity supply chains, and was getting impacted in return. So in order to overcome all these issues, what we required was a convention, which is why this particular convention was brought into picture. So basically we had the natural and human induced impacts that was affecting the productivity of land, making these lands desert like. What we had was increasing population, and for these increasing population, what you had to provide was food, what you had to provide was food security, and we had to take care of the future generations as well. So desertification had a larger implication when it comes to food and water security, livelihood. Large number of people started migrating as well. This led to conflict among the international countries, leading to what is called as threatening the international security. To overcome all these issues, we required a convention, and that is why we have come up with what is called as the UNCCD. Added to it, if we look into other countries, desertification affects Africa the most, where 2/3 of the continent is desert or drylands. It is not a problem confined to drylands in Africa, but over 30% of the land in United States is affected by desertification. 1/4 of Latin America and Caribbean is deserts and drylands. In Spain, 1/5 of the land is at the risk of turning into the deserts. The growing severity of the threat in the northern hemisphere is also illustrated by severe droughts in the United States and water scarcity in southern Europe. In China, since the 1950s, sand drift, expanding deserts have taken a toll of nearly 7 lakh hectares of cultivated land, 2.35 million hectares of rangeland, 6.4 million hectares of forest, woodlands, as well as shrublands. Worldwide, some 70% of the 5.2 billion hectares hectares drylands requested for agriculture are already degraded and threatened by desertification. So what we have to do is fight this menace of desertification. How do we do that? Among the practical measures undertaken to prevent and restore degraded land, what we have to do is prevent soil erosion, improve warning system and water resource management, sustainable pasture, forest and livestock management, aero seeding over shifting sand dunes, narrow strip planting, wind breaks and shelter belts of live plants, agroforestry ecosystems have to be developed. What we are currently witnessing is a large scale deforestation by the countries for the development of industrial output. This has to be minimized, and what we require is afforestation and reforestation, introduction of new species and varieties with the capacity to tolerate salinity and aridity, and at the same time, whenever there is deforestation, what we usually have afforestation in that particular area. So one type of plant is replaced with another plant. So we have to understand what is the species that is present in that area and ensure only that species is afforested in that area. So replacement by a different species or a different plant is not to be done in that area. Added to it, environmentally sound human settlements will also have to take place. And do remember, desertification has implications for food and water security and livelihood. So basically, we have to ensure that more plants are planted in that particular area so that the roots of these trees hold the soil together and ultimately help reduce soil erosion from wind as well as from rain. What are the measures taken by India to prevent desertification? There is National Afforestation and Eco Development Board, which is implementing National Afforestation Program for ecological restoration of degraded forests and adjoining areas through people's participation. So this scheme is implemented by a three-tier institutional structure. What we have is the State Forest Developmental Agency at the state level, Forest Developmental Agency at the Forest Division level, and Joint Forest Management Committee at the village level. Then we have the National Mission for Green India, which aims at protecting, restoring and enhancing India's forest cover by means of plantation activities in forest and non-forest areas. Then we also have the Demand Driven Action Oriented Research work, which is carried out through projects under National Mission on Himalayan Studies. And finally, what we have is Integrated Water Management Program, which is implemented under water development component of Pradhana Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana with an objective to develop rain-fed and degraded lands. So the activities include drainage line treatment, soil and moisture conservation, rainwater harvesting, nursery raising, pasture development, and this will ultimately help us combat desertification in India. These are some of the measures taken in India, and as part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section what are the other global efforts or the global interventions taken to combat desertification and drought world over. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.